And we're live.
What
That
a
was pretty
banger.
cool. Yeah, man. I want to know who put that together. I want to hire him to create an intro for my podcast.
Yeah, it's too bad I don't know him.
Yeah. Oh, welcome to King Pilled, folks. If you are, if you're coming in now or now, um, or now, then you missed out on the awesome banger. Uh, of course, the majority of people who see this are going to see it afterwards, so they get to see the awesome banger. If you are listening on the podcast version of this, you also got to hear the awesome banger because it's actually there in the audio, and we don't have to task our little grunt monkey to go try to splice in an extra audio clip or anything. We decided to make it easier on him and just put it in the live show. Sorry, I had a massive sneeze just before we hit the go live button, and I can feel it building back there. So you guys might have to bear with me a little bit here. Um, My says, "Did you make the intro, Cooper? This slaps." Yes, Cooper made the intro. It is a banger. We've been needing one. We've been using the royalty free Restream intro, and we're ready to have our own. And it turns out that Cooper here is not as useless as he looks. He actually has a lot of really interesting talents. So we weaponized a particular part of his autism, and he made that banger for us. So thank you, Cooper.
You're welcome.
All right, so today we're gonna for at least a little bit here, we're gonna reboot an old bit on this show, which was beat up on libertarians because they're an easy target. But I promise that's not actually going to be the bulk of what we talk about today, because our critique, I guess, in this sense, is actually directed at more than just libertarians. More people are acting like libertarians than realize that they're acting like libertarians, and we're trying to develop a vision for a path forward for our little circle of, I don't know, right wing dissidents or whatever it is that characterizes all of us and gets us talking to each other and spending time around each other. There's a whole lot of critique that's going on, and we're going to participate in that critique, ironically enough, but we're attempting to participate in that critique to the end of actually creating something that we can all start working on. We can actually do tangibly to create to start creating. I don't know. You could call it maybe like the breakaway civilization, the civilization that's gonna replace whatever is becoming increasingly so the ashes that is Western civilization. Western civilizations is kind of burning down, and a lot of the I don't know, the proposals or the actual methods that people are focused on, you might kind of lump these broadly under the category of Red Caesar. They're interesting philosophies, they're interesting strategies, but I think they're missing a little something. They're missing that oomph inside that's actually going to make them go. And I think that real oomph is that ultimately they're trying to build liberal institutions to try to rescue the collapsing liberal institutions. And a liberal institution, by definition, is not going to survive the collapse of the West, the collapse of modernity, whatever you want to call it. So we need to start getting really creative about the actual institutions that we're building and the purpose behind them, and what are we actually trying to accomplish in I guess a more thoughtful context. So that's what we're going to discuss here today. Before we get started, got to do all the plugs. So if you would like to be a channel member, you could post cool little emotes, and you can give us some money to keep the channel going. And increasingly over the next few episodes, you're going to start learning that you're not just, if you give us money through one of these angles here, this isn't just a normal kind of transaction, just your typical parasocial internet transaction where you have people that create stuff and people that give them money for creating it, and then it's just kind of a one-off transaction. We're actually we're working on building something that is more creative than that, and something that actually could have some legs. So anything that you want to contribute to the show is contributing toward the creation of that larger agenda. Right now, we have ideas of what we want it to look like, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, so we're not going to start giving details just yet, just because it would sound retarded if we started talking about it before fully fleshing it out. Yeah, an arc in a sense. 2-Bit Podcast chimes in. He's a little bit, he's privy to some of the behind-the-scenes stuff here because he's part of the King Pilled Supporting Listeners group, which you can actually, you can also join, and you can become even more, not just contributing toward the fund that helps us conceive of this this new idea, but you can actually be a part of it if you would like. If you come into the Supporting Listeners group, then you get to be a part of it, and especially if you get in before we do our relaunch of it. If you come in before we do our relaunch of it, you can be in the inner circle. You can be part of the closest where all the action is. So if you'd like to do that for now, go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled and sign up there. Pick whatever tier you want. If you want to, I don't remember what the price tiers are now, but whatever tier you sign up for now, you get into the arc before the flood gets here, and then you get access to everything there. So I'm hearing a little bit of feedback on the mic. I don't know if it's there's like a little static kind of, and I don't know if that's actually coming through on the audio. So if it's not, then we'll just ignore it. And there it kind of went away. Oh no, it's that. So it's there whenever I'm talking. Let me know if you guys can hear that, and we can try to get rid of it. The really big boat version, not the gay Cyprian/Peterson analogy. Yeah, an arc that's an actual really big boat thing. Okay, so yeah, you can become a channel member, which will give you a little king badge next to your name. You get to stand out. You get to use the emotes, and you get to be a part of the special kids in the group chat. We've got a couple members in here already that I see. So we'll give you little emotes, and you can post them whenever we say certain things. Let's see, what's the other thing? So become a channel member, join the Supporting Listeners group. I think that's it. So this first, okay. So before I get into it, Cooper, do you have any preliminary thoughts or anything based on our conversation earlier today?
Hold on, I have to put a fire up.
Okay. Cooper's in dad mode, to his credit. This is a podcast that very much endorses being in dad mode. That's like maybe the most fundamental thing. If you don't know where to start, if you're kind of like, I see Western civilization burning around me and I'm trying to figure out who to donate money to, or who to give my time and effort to, or which political ideology to subscribe to. If you don't have a kid, then you should get started on that. First and foremost, set everything else aside, focus on getting a kid. If you don't even have a woman to make a kid with, because here we do not condone going out and purchasing children with another man. So that's off the table. You may not go purchase a child with another man and be a listener of King Pilled. So you got to get a kid. You don't have a woman. Well, then you need to make yourself a more valuable man. Instead of sitting around and crying about women not paying attention to you, or crying about gynocentrism, or crying about how inequitable the systems are, instead of leaning into and identifying with your own victimhood here, actually make yourself a valuable man. And this value can be parsed over a few different domains. We may get into that a little bit today. We'll see. But your very first fundamental job is to progress from the level of adult to parent, because a group of parents will build a much better, much more stable, much more moral, much longer lasting society than a group of adults. Adults are just like stunted parents. You have to become a parent. We are parent supremacists here. And if you don't like it, become a parent or go away. I'm just kidding. A little bit. So, okay, where were we going? Oh, so Cooper, you had to put out a fire. So I was vamping while you put out a fire. Do you have any preliminary thoughts?
Nope. Let's rock.
Okay.
You were trying to buy yourself some time to take a swig.
Yeah. So one of the guys that I've come across recently on the internet that's saying things that I like is a guy on Twitter named Kruptos. It's at _ KRUPTOS. I've seen so far he has a Substack, and then he reads his Substack posts as a podcast, which is a great way of duplicating up your media to meet all the different consumption opportunities. And I've seen him on Aaron McIntyre's show. He's done some really banger threads on Twitter. I was like, I really identify with this guy. And then I started realizing I think he's either Orthodox or he's Orthodox adjacent. And then I was listening to him on Aaron McIntyre's show, and he described the way he got started was basically he was like a reply guy to Charles Haywood and was emailing Charles Haywood with replies. And he and Charles Haywood was like, you should start publishing this stuff. I don't know if this was like when my wife said you should start a podcast so you can talk to people who actually care. I don't know if Charles is doing the same thing. I think he was probably saying this is actually genuinely good stuff and you should put it out there because it is good stuff. Our good friend Mai in the chat says, I'm a fellow Christian ghetto enjoyer. A man of culture and class. I'm assuming you're a man. Yes, Christian ghettos. This is actually one of the things that Kruptos talks about creating Christian ghettos. And what I really like about this piece that he wrote recently is he's doing something that not a lot of people are doing, which is thinking outside the box. He has a really good understanding of the mechanism of the managerial state, the essentiality of rationality and using rationale as a fundamental substrate in building systems. These are all characteristic things of modernity. And what he rightfully recognizes is this pattern and tendency in modernity is burning to a point where it's going to burn itself out into something post-modernity. And part of burning into post-modernity is necessarily the collapse of so-called liberal structures. Structures that are inherent to the liberal world as we've known it for 500 years. What a lot of people are not doing, and what I'm hoping to start changing, contributing to changing, is thinking about this in much broader terms. We need to get a lot more granular about what it actually means to be a human being and what it means to have a human society. What is this like on really, really fundamental terms? Because if you properly understand the state of the modern world, if you properly understand the reality of the liberal mindset and the sort of institutions it builds and the tendencies of those institutions, then you'll recognize that the collapse of this empire must necessarily be the collapse of that sort of institution. The institution that's structured as a bureaucracy, that requires lots and lots of managers, that operates off of a whole big bundle of policies and procedures, of techniques. Listen to Kruptos' conversation with Aaron McIntyre for a really good breakdown of what technique is in this context and why we're necessarily going to need to evolve beyond these sorts of structures. We need to reimagine what human social structures look like. We need to invent new human social structures. And so if we're going to do that, then we need to start at the beginning. We have to start from the ground up. Because ultimately, what fundamentally makes a human society thrive and flourish is trust. You have to have trust between the people participating in that society. And not just simply for the means of exchange. You have to have an expectation of trust of the people around you so that you, like a healthy society, we recognize is one where you leave your door open all the time. And this isn't strictly because, oh, I trust that when I participate in this transaction with that person's gonna, like, they're giving me good money. It's not, it's the money itself isn't counterfeit. That's like a higher layer of trust. You need a more fundamental layer of trust, which is that I trust if I leave my front door unlocked, that people aren't going to come in and clear my stuff out or come grab my kid or come attack me. That's a more fundamental level of trust. And you can't simply automate that type of trust. This is the mistake I think that is being made on while I appreciate the blockchain enthusiasts, and I appreciate the type of world they're looking to create, I think they're making a fundamental mistake. Not all of them, obviously. Anytime we make a blanket statement like this, we're obviously speaking to a specific category of them. But the vast majority of them, what they're saying is, how do we take these liberal institutions and encode these liberal institutions into encoded liberal institutions that will operate like liberal institutions for us? The problem is that the liberal institutions aren't flawed because they're not encoded enough. That's to take liberalism and critique liberalism with liberalism. The liberal institutions' problem is not that they aren't encoded enough. It's that they're institutions whose default wiring is to detach themselves from the people in the institutions. Liberalism is fundamentally like the beginning process of automating human relationships. So then, like, something like Bitcoin, where you're like, okay, we're going to create a decentralized market, a market that's fully decentralized. There's great aspects to that. I think that this technology can be useful in a certain domain, but only if there is already an existing base layer of trust and commitment to a core set of values. You have to have those before you onboard the technology. Or what's going to happen if you don't maintain that meat space level trust, then inevitably the technology that you use is going to begin to evolve itself away from you. It's going to, technology, when not properly operated by upstanding holy people, inevitably begins to depersonalize the user of the technology. It develops like an intelligence of its own, and you reach a point where you are no longer using the technology is using you. So our problem is not, hey, nobody trusts each other, so how can we make it so that we can live with nobody trusting each other? That's just trying to take the liberal project even further. What we need to be doing is saying, how can we create communities that are fundamentally built around trust? Not where trust is automated, but where there actually is trust. Because if you don't have that fundamental layer of trust, you're leaving the door open for resentment. You're leaving the door open, and the little seed of liberalism is going to stick its foot right back in there and fast forward a little ways, which is going to be even less and less time fast forwarding because of everything getting automated. And you're going to have, like green-haired they-thems protesting on your front doorstep. So in order to do this, if we're going to build a society that is patterned first and foremost on a fundamental layer of trust, then we can't start with the trustless system. We might be able to use the trustless system, but only once we have that established layer of trust. And then necessarily, if we see this as a prerequisite for the functioning of a society, then you're making your job a lot more difficult if you go out and say, we need to go conquer this existing institution and try to turn its head in the direction we want to go. Because that existing institution already has a whole bunch of people in it. And now you've got to try to solve this trust problem with not just a whole bunch of people, but a whole bunch of people who are likely have some form of antagonism or resentment toward you for taking their toy away. So you're not going to be able to just like hitch a ride on some sort of political movement and then fit your ideas into it and try to get your ideas to turn the system over from the inside or something like that. You're going to have to build from the ground up. You're going to have to create intentional communities built from the ground up that are actually designed so that they can actually become whatever this new community structure is going to be. And it just so happens that a major crisis point in the West right now, especially, and that the West is exporting, because this is what the West does. It invents evil things and exports them so that it can sustain the It can try to outlast the evil that it's exported by not keeping it here. And we've reached a point where there's nowhere else to export it. So now they're importing it, bringing it back in to create the final step of the destabilization that completely breaks down and atomizes everyone. And they're using this individualism, liberal brainworm to accomplish this. The technology will fundamentally atomize you. Runaway technology, where you get to the point where you could think of like a car, where eventually you get to the point where we're now controlled by the cars because the cars have places they need to go. They've got this road, all this road network is built up, and the cars want to drive. So we don't go buy a car because we need a car. We buy the car because the car needs us. Somebody needs to drive it. We're possessed by this idea of driving a car. We could have a perfectly healthy, stable society constructed differently without cars. But now car driving has become so predominant that it's not possible to live without driving a car unless you make massive sacrifices that by definition are not scalable. On individual levels, you can make little things here and there, but by and large, not everybody can go live in the woods. If everybody was living in the woods, then nobody would want to live in the woods. There has to be some sort of a balancing out here. So, how did I get onto cars? The technology is going to atomize you. So, if we know that technology is going to atomize us, but we can't not use technology, how should we then live? How do we move forward? And it's going to start with establishing relationships, potentially through technology, because that's the great thing about technology is that when used properly, it can drastically improve your ability to form relationships. But those relationships you can't start getting really wonky with the definition of relationship. Like a strictly parasocial community can't be the same as an in-person, in real life community. These are different kinds of relationships. But if we're necessarily starting out as we are decentralized and we want to combat decentralization, we want to centralize, we need to pool our assets, pool our resources, pool our communities together. That's going to necessarily start out with technology. We're going to begin using technology from the beginning. And if we know that technology is ultimately an atomizing force, then that informs how we should be using the technology. We should be using it with discretion, self-consciously aware of this tendency and constantly acting to combat that tendency by actually porting that relationship to meat-space relationships, where you're not just strictly interacting through one technological vector, but the rest of your life begins to be integrated with these technological disparate relationships. Fundamentally, if the characteristic trait of modernism, of what Western civilization is now, the established mindset of the cathedral, the regime, the system, whatever you want to call it, if we can agree that its characteristic trait is that it dissolves human relationships, that it dissolves human societies, that it's reducing us and deracinating us and separating ourselves from ourselves, if we can agree that that's what's happening, then the only way to actually substantively move beyond that point is to begin building intentional communities that may use technology or leverage technology, but they're using them to leverage the core values that are there from the beginning. How am I doing so far, Cooper?
Doing great.
You have any thoughts?
To be honest, after getting interrupted a couple of times by the little one, I'm getting caught up. I got kind of discombobulated.
Right. Okay. So let's share this. Oh, hold on. Got to see the what's going on in the chat because people are freaking out, and I don't know why. I want to understand.
Because our
Oh,
friend
man.
Random Username just gifted out a bunch of memberships.
Right on. Thank you, Random Username. That is awesome. Welcome to King Pilled, Kyle. Welcome to King Pilled. Welcome to the King Pilled, Random Username. Nice. Okay, you guys already got ahead of me. I was going to say, let's see some king emojis, some king emotes in here, but you guys are doing it. Let's see, who else? We got Duffy Davenport, Stephen David, Dr. Crispy Rothschild, Joshua Ham, and Zach Putnam are all gifted memberships by Random Username. We're doing it, guys. We're doing it. We're building. We are in the act of building the system that's going to replace Western civilization. 2-Bit Podcast says, what Charles Haywood is going to be on our show this Friday. Excellent. I will not be missing that conversation. Charles is one of these guys who I think actually gets this. He actually gets that whatever the next thing is going to look like, it's going to be fundamentally different from what this thing looks like. He's really focused on developing something that I would say like a vehicle, a political vehicle that can not just navigate the upcoming stormy seas, but can actually be like a warship in those stormy seas, which is great. I'm glad that there's people that are doing that, because I don't really want to be the guy commanding the warship in the stormy seas. I wouldn't mind being the guy who funds the guy commanding the warship in the open seas, but I would rather be withdrawn from the action myself and living with my family. So I'm very glad we have guys like Charles Haywood, but we need more. We need more people who are actively thinking about this problem and investing in ways to solve this problem. This is one of the points of Kruptos here, and let's share the screen and hope that it doesn't lose its mind. He posted a recent Substack here, and I wanted to read a few points from it. I would encourage you. I'll put the link in the description here. I'll make sure that our little our grunt puts the link in the podcast feed as well, in the podcast description. If you want, you can go to Substack and look up Seeking the Hidden Thing. It's seekingthehiddenthing.com is his Substack, and he's @_Kruptos on Twitter, which is KRUPTOS. So he posted this Substack post a few weeks ago. Actually 5 days ago. He said, building a parallel polity, sketching out the road ahead. I occasionally say on Twitter that conservatives should stop giving to the Republican Party and use the money to build autonomous parallel communities. What does that look like? Let's sketch it out. Kill this here. Continue reading. So I wasn't going to read the whole thing here necessarily, because you should go read his thing or go listen to him read it. But I wanted to get a couple of the points here. So he says, in my recent piece on truth, narrative, and propaganda, I made the argument that what we should be trying to create in a parallel polity is space. The space to determine our own affairs, our own future, to forge bonds and become a people centered around our shared faith in Christ. People ask me which denomination, which faith tradition will take the lead. I've made the argument on Twitter, do follow me @_Kruptos, that the divisions within Western Christianity have come about for two reasons. One is that we were the only game in town at one point. When one's faith isn't threatened from the outside, it's easy to magnify differences. Those differences were also easy to articulate because Western Christianity embraced rationalism, the idea that most, if not all, things can be known and stated with clear concepts. So people began articulating and arguing over those articulations and splitting over them. Being theologically correct was seen as a virtue high up on the hierarchy of values. We've gotten to a point now where pretty much every argument that can be made has been made, and much of it has just simply exhausted itself. This is part of why the Western Church wanes today. It poured itself out fighting over narrower battles. Then when the real enemy showed up at the door, it had given away much of its spiritual heritage and strength and had embraced the same posture of the enemy, rationalism. It had given away its spiritual defenses for the pursuit of theological correctness. This is a long way of saying that there is an enemy within the gates and it is devouring us. As the threat grows, I believe a renewed embrace of our spiritual heritage will once again draw us into greater union, allowing us to leave the childish squabbles of rationalism behind in the process. So essentially, he's identifying this phenomenon that we're talking about, where you have rationalism is kind of like the core of the heart of liberalism. And it's this act of rationalizing and building institutions on rationalism, which then the institutions are then being constantly critiqued and optimized and improved and automated for the sake of achieving greater and greater rationalistic integrity, which then builds in this positive feedback loop where the systems themselves begin automating themselves and using human beings to do that. Where invariably the people within the system begin acting for the sake of the system itself rather than the original values of the system. This is one of the iron laws of bureaucracy. I can't remember who was named after, but he described how with any bureaucratic system that's established, inevitably it will split into two groups of people: the people who are acting for the original purposes of the organization, and the people who are acting for the organization itself. And it's on this dialectic line that the entire tradition of liberalism has begun to dismantle and atomize all of these institutions. So the institutions are built up, but the institutions built up precisely to bring up its opposition so the two can war against each other and gradually atomize further. This happened now within the Western Church. And what we've seen with this proliferation of Protestant denominations was simply the precursor for the proliferation of ideologies in general. Because an ideology is kind of like an artificial form of community. You create an ideology, you create this specific set of principles as an organizing principle. And it just so happens that the more different ideologies you get, they actually are going to tend toward nonsense. Because if the goal is the organization, then you can actually organize more and more radical people by getting them to pledge their loyalty to something more and more nonsensical. Because ultimately, the only reason somebody would pledge their loyalty to something nonsensical is if they were 100% fully bought in. And as Curtis Yarvin says, that nonsensical belief becomes a uniform. And when you have a uniform, then you have an army. So this is the way that we've seen the radical decentralization of the Christian church in the form of Protestantism. And yet somehow a lot of people who see themselves as Christians think that the way forward is radical decentralization of the market. Why would you not think that radical decentralization of the market would go any better than radical decentralization of the church? It doesn't make any sense at all. The ultimate form of radical decentralization is where there are no communities. There is literally the absence of community. Everyone is literally one single itemized unit. That's not a community. Humans are a communal species. Complete decentralization is hell, not a functioning human society. So continuing the reading here. This idea of space, though, is not something the regime will allow easily. The technocratic managerial state wants to control all things. Progress demands it. The exigencies of technical control demand it. When we say parallel polity, what we mean is a separate nation governing its own affairs within the territory controlled and managed by the regime. Why this? Why not set off somewhere and colonize some distant unoccupied place? Well, there really isn't anywhere to go. And besides, this place is our home. So what we're talking about is carving out colonies for ourselves within the empire right under its nose. No easy feat these days because they know where you are and generally know what you are up to. What this means, though, is establishing the grounds for the legitimacy of our own self-rule. There are basically two criteria for this. One is internal, the support of the people. The second is external, that we are recognized by other states as our own self-governing entity or entities. I envision more of a plurality than a single thing. This means being able to defend oneself from the regime on one's own terms, not using the mechanism of regime power to achieve some sort of sufferance within the larger auspices and protection of the regime, its power, its structures, and its laws, but a full autonomous state with its own governing principles and institutions defended by itself on its own terms, using its own power to do so. True legitimacy. That said, you don't arrive at true state legitimacy on day one, so how do we get from here to there? We begin with networking and brainstorming. We keep doing what we're doing now online, talking, thinking, planning, building connections. We gradually begin to move from laboratory to doing. We raise funds. Like many endeavors that originate in the Christian community, some will give generously. So if you are feeling that the Lord is laying claim to your wallet, your bank account, you make sure you answer that call with a yes. And others will give of their time, skills, efforts, and prayers. There is something you can begin doing. Begin surrounding this endeavor in prayer because it will meet opposition. Not just from the regime, but from the powers and principalities. In other words, demons. We need to hold out the goal, the vision of a space where we can be who we are and manage our affairs in a way that is in keeping with our fundamental faith commitment. So I think that where we're at right now is at this point here, right between where he says we gradually begin to move from laboratory to doing. We need to start moving from laboratory to doing. The entire dissident right-wing commentariat is very wrapped up in theory selling. We're spending lots of time talking about trying to diagnose the problem in this way or that way, or trying to, well, maybe we could solve it this way, maybe we could solve it this way. Instead of theory selling about it, start putting it into practice. Begin actually building something that you think might work. Because we don't have time. On one hand, we have all the time in the world because we don't have anything else to do. On the other hand, the longer that we take to build whatever the new thing is going to be, the less the less off the ground we're going to be able to get it before, I don't know, the implosion of the rest of society. It seems like there's a lot of energy of people just kind of, not even just within our communities, but just sort of like in the society at large. There's kind of a lot of people that are just sitting around waiting for something to happen. There's not a lot of relative to the whole society. There's not a lot of industriousness. There's not a lot of actual accomplishment happening. A lot of people just treading water. And it's no coincidence that there's this so-called meaning crisis where nihilism is building because nobody has anything to invest in. Imagine a society that could build, this isn't quite it, but I mean, this is pretty good. Imagine a society that could come together to build something equivalent to what a cathedral was in medieval society. For us, building a cathedral, the equivalent of that, would be vastly more than building a cathedral itself. But even building a cathedral itself would be great. We've got a society that's full of commentators and not enough builders. This was the critique that I was myself running up against as I was starting to over the last few years, beginning to realize where this was going. And I was like, what am I building? I'm not actually building anything. So I had to take some time off and start working on building things. And I'm in the process of building things. But I want to be surrounded by a bunch of people who are in the process of building things. Because that's what's going to make it possible to actually create a community like this. If you think that, like, I don't know, someone's going to come in and, like, maybe, you know, Tucker Carlson's going to get elected president and he's going to forestall the collapse a little bit further and buy you some more time. Maybe. Probably not. Given what we've discussed about the die-off of the boomers coming over the next 10 or 15 years and everything that's, all the social dynamics that are going to go along with that, if you really want to make headway in establishing yourself in the, whatever the new territory, the new frontier, if you want to establish yourself in the new frontier as a viable alternative, or you want to be part of something that's established as a viable alternative in the post-liberal society, then you got to start putting your money where your mouth is now. You got to start building or getting involved with something or someone who is building. Not just building some sort of political movement that might be able to gain some steam and take control of something, or leave all that aside. Don't try to build something that's going to govern the entire country. Don't even try to build something that's going to govern your entire state or even your city. Build something that can govern you and your friends and their families. build a tribe that's as sustainable as you can get it at a small scale. Get a minimal viable product. Something that's sustainable at a small scale, where no matter how chaotic and crazy things get, you have a plan. You have like a break glass in case of emergency plan to cover you financially, to get food, to travel, to whatever you're going to need. You need a network. You need a community. And it just so happens there's a lot of people who need a community right now. There's a lot of people talking about this, the absence of community, the loss of community, from COVID, from social media in general, from the development of technology that's slowly atomizing us and breaking us apart, the existence of cars causing neighborhoods to get further and further stretched apart, so you're further and further away from each other. Like, yeah, it's going to be great to get. I hear people talk about, oh, we need to, all move to the same place and all live in the same place. Yeah, that's fine. That's good. We should be doing that. But that alone isn't enough. You need to not just be all gathered in one place together. You also need to be wealthy. You need to have a lot of resources together. You need to be able to accomplish a lot of things. And you need to be a high-value community to people outside the community, where you now have staying power within the community because you've provided so much value that people don't want anything to happen to you. At the very least, they'll leave you alone. If the entire structure of society is going to change, by definition, the communities are going to have to look different. But this opens so many opportunities.
Can I paint tonight, maybe?
Because the more things rearrange, the more things get flipped upside down, the more new things are going to need to be built. Our good friend 2-Bit Podcast here talks a lot about the competency crisis, that we're entering we're going through a competency crisis. You have all of these, all this infrastructure that's been built and put into place and established and then just maintained. But given a lot of the other social factors, how many people have been pulled into white collar work? How many people have been drowned in student debt and just can't function societally anymore? For a whole variety of reasons, all of the infrastructure is crumbling. And eventually you're going to get the guy like the meme where you have the one dude that's in Nebraska who maintains the one little twig that the entire pile of rocks is balancing on. And he's going to die and nobody's going to be there nobody's going to know how to do his job and everything's going to come cascading down. We already saw during COVID just how tenuous the structure of our society with all the different what do you call it? The delivery systems and supply chain. That's what I'm looking for. These supply chains are just a house of cards on a house of cards on a house of cards on a house of cards, because they're trapped in this ever increasing positive feedback loop of technological optimization being applied to technological optimization. And when everything is just about number go up, then you whittle everything down to the thinnest of margins to ensure that number go up continually. Well, number ain't going to keep going up. You've got to divest yourself of the existing structure of society and begin investing yourself in building the next one. Extract your assets from the mechanism of this society and plant your assets into the future. This requires a lot of thought, a lot of planning, there's a lot of people who just aren't going to be able to think in this way. It's like, I don't have time. I've got kids I got to take care of. I've got a job to do. The job is really busy. I don't even have the space to think about all of this stuff. If that's the case for you, then you need to hitch a ride with someone who's going to do it for you and just have them tell you what to do. Have them tell you where to put your money, where to put, you need to outsource that, but this needs to become a top priority for you. The longer that you wait, the more tenuous your position gets, and the less latitude you have for making mistakes. It's like the frog in the pot as the water is slowly being turned up. Well, pretty soon, maybe we'll adapt this analogy a little bit. That dial that's slowly turning up the heat is going to start turning a lot faster and is going to vaporize you if you don't get yourself out of the pot. We've been conditioned to think and to operate as isolated people. You know, we have friends, we have families, we have good relationships, maybe not so good relationships. Some of us are really tight, some of us are close, some of us aren't. But we've been conditioned to think of ourselves as an individual person. I have my own social security number. I have my date of birth. I have my individual identifying characteristics. But the thing that identifies you with those characteristics is going to die. Maybe it dies in 100 years or 200 years, and you never have to worry about all this. Probably not. But it's going to die. So you're going to need a new thing that identifies you. You're going to need a tribe. You don't want to be one of the atomized, isolated pods out in the middle of nowhere, because if you want to think of this in like dystopian terms, the machine's little scanning droids are going to come out and they're going to pick you up and pull you in. The gravity of the machine is going to get a lot stronger. It's extending out further and further. And the people, you may be kind of comfortable right now. I've got a few months saved up. I've got some operating flexibility. You know, if shit hit the fan tomorrow, you know, I have my aunt that I could go stay with, or, you know, whatever. But you need a lot bigger of a bug out bag than that. You need a bug out bag for your, not just like your actual things that you take with you, but for like your community, your ability for forming relationships. Would you be able to, what value would you provide to a prospective community if all of a sudden you found yourself without one, where the default status is you are decommunalized? You have to apply for entry into a community, and that community is going to accept you based on what you provide to them. A new sort of feudalism. This is why, incidentally, in the past, if you got, I've got to figure out how I can say this without really setting the censors off. Freeing indentured servants was not necessarily a compassionate thing to do to them, because they did not have status. They didn't have legal status in the society that they were in. Because they didn't have legal status in that society, freeing them was basically dooming them to begging. They would have to beg for someone to give them scraps, or beg to the point where somebody else would take them on as an indentured servant. Obviously, I'm using this as there's a bit of a euphemism there. That's the sort of model we're going to wind up in again.
A Slav.
A Slav, yes. A posh redneck. Shout out random username. He gifted another King Pilled membership, so Aaron K is now a member. And random username gifted another YouTube membership, and now Xavier's a member. I don't think I could change that. That's great. Strong emojis. That's funny.
So why am I not a? Shouldn't I be like a member by default? Why can't I use the emoji?
That's what I would think. I don't know.
You would think as a moderator I'd be able to do that.
Are you not able to?
No, I'm not. And I'm not paying me
something.
money. I'm not doing that.
Type something. And I will I'll see if I can change your role or something.
Not important. We don't have to worry about this right now.
Yeah. Nope. Can't do anything to it.
Oh well.
All right. Anyways, so having a you can think about this in terms of like your citizenship is expiring. What would you do tomorrow if you found out that you were not a citizen of the country that you're in? You didn't have any of the benefits that come with citizenship. You need to go find a new country that will accept you. Except you may not have the means to actually Okay, that can't. So you must be able to choose who, when you do a gifted membership, you must be able to choose who you can give it to. No, he says rolled snake eyes. It was actually just chance. That's great. So Cooper
Well, I
is
mean,
now a member.
you've given out so many at this point. Like there's 14 people watching. How many more are left? But thanks,
That's
man.
true.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, so like think about you suddenly wake up tomorrow and you have no citizenship in the country that you reside in. The citizenship model is over. There are no citizens, there are no nations. That's not how people organize themselves anymore. Instead, you have to go find someone who will vouch for you. You have to find a tribe that will say, yeah, he's a person. He's a person of value. We trust his reputation. He has a good reputation. We will vouch for him. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to transact with anyone. If you found yourself in that situation tomorrow and you wouldn't have anyone to vouch for you, you are in especially stark circumstances. You need to work hard to build out your network, to get connected with people and to provide value for them, to prove that you're a valuable person who should remain a part of their tribe. This is going to be a necessary self-selection mechanism. I'm not saying that overnight everything is going to be just stripped down and all of a sudden you're going to wind up with no citizenship. But I'm saying this is the sort of process that's going to evolve over time. When the World Economic Forum talks about stakeholder capitalism, they're basically just describing private governance. For a long time, the private companies, everyone kind of knows this is sort of like part of being red-pilled or whatever, is that you realize the private companies are actually the ones who are governing things. So when libertarians cry about we need to privatize the state or whatever, well, the state is already privately owned. It's only publicly owned to you. It's privately owned to the people who actually own it. But what we're seeing with the death of managerialism is going to be to the death of the state, which means that third party is going to be taken out of there. The political system is an intermediary between the actual owners and the citizenry.
What's that Ayn Rand quote about, like, the most oppressed person being
The individual?
No. Big business or something like that.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. No.
Talk about becoming a meme of yourself.
What do we think about the fact that our boy Menser was a Randian? Like, how do we account for that?
He's the only Randian I like.
Were his muscles just big enough that it made up for the retardation?
This is the only Randian I like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look like that, you can believe whatever you want.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Argue with him?
No.
Right. This is probably a good time. That's a natural segue to plug one of our means for improving your value as a person. When we talk about improving your value as a person, don't go all bleeding heart lib on us. We're not saying that you're we're not saying you're worthless, even though you are. We're not trying to talk to you on that front. We're saying your value subjectively to everyone else. This is a basic point that's made by Mises, is that value is subjective. So your value to other people is subject to their perception of you. If you seem like a low value person, you are a low value person. until proven otherwise, until you change that. Now, fortunately, you can change it. And we're working on a kind of like a framework that you could use to understand, to kind of depict this. But one of the basic things that you can do to improve yourself if you're a man is getting big muscles. Now, this is a little bit of a meme. Everyone just says, your muscles equate to your value as a person. But in a sense, it's kind of true. Because what does it mean if you see a guy that has big muscles? And I'm not talking about what's the kid, the YouTuber that's like he's so buff he can barely breathe.
Sam, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Soliek or something like that.
Oh yeah, Sulek. Sam Sulek, I think is his name. Yeah.
Something like that.
But even someone like that, like you can't just like inject something into yourself and just like pop up like Popeye. If you see someone who's a guy who's jacked, you know a lot about him just by default. Just glancing at him, you know a lot about his work ethic, his willpower, his ability to throw you. You know a lot about his character just from his appearance. And you've got a lot of natural biological impulses that are going to make you feel more comfortable around someone who's taken good care of their body. You can sense somebody's health like around them. And someone who takes good care of their body is probably going to be, this is a decent thin slicing tool for evaluating, is this someone who's valuable to be around? Is this someone who I want around me in an emergency? Is this someone who I'd be willing to give something up myself to be able to have his company? So if you're a man and you don't have big muscles, then you need to work on building big muscles because of what big muscles stand for. Big muscles are a proxy for your character, your health, and your capacity to produce things. If you don't have big muscles and you would like to, then we can help you with that. One of the most valuable things that you can do as a man is to dedicate yourself to the self-discipline of building your own health, primarily through building muscle. And not just for the aesthetic reasons either. Cooper, what are some of the benefits of building muscle beyond just aesthetics?
Increased testosterone.
What about recoverability?
Higher metabolism. Stronger. Fucking. I don't have my list in front of me. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, you've been a little distracted with the little one.
Oh, little ones. It's plural now.
Oh, it's plural?
Yeah.
Oh man. Cooper is a very busy dad.
The sky is falling for them.
Do you tell him that the sky is falling for you every day and you don't feel bad for him?
Well, you see, okay. The little one came down, the youngest came down first. I dismissed her. She came down again. I got a little irritated. She came down a third time, and then I yelled. And then she stormed off upstairs crying, and I felt bad, so I had to get up and go after her. And then I had to help her with whatever things she needed. And then the other one now is coming down here asking for things because apparently he didn't learn what happened.
I thought you were going to say she went up and set the other one down to come so she didn't get yelled at.
Well, that might have been what happened.
The
so now he's
of
been
fatherhood.
Twice.
Yeah, so
this is why I'm not a libertarian, because my wife is gone for like an hour and I'm downstairs away from the kids and the world is falling apart for them. They need order, strong authoritarian order.
Yeah.
And the masses are like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, being a parent should disabuse you of any notion of the legitimacy of anything about libertarian political philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, building muscle is not just, we described you the benefits of the aesthetic aspects of it. Like a great thing is that if you take 1 pound of fat and you convert it to 1 pound of muscle, 1 pound of muscle takes up 3 times less space than 1 pound of fat. And not just that, the place where the fat gets stored is in all the unaesthetic places, and the place where the muscle gets stored is in all the aesthetic places. So you get a compounding beneficial effect.
And 1 pound of muscle is 3 times as metabolically active as 1 pound of fat. So just by having that one pound, you're going to be burning more energy at rest.
Right. So then the
So
muscle...
you're burning more calories.
Yes.
Burning more fat.
Burning more fat. So the muscle will burn the fat. So as soon as you start putting on the muscle, you start building a compounding effect in the fat burning process.
Yeah,
which is going to make you healthier overall. It's going to make you smarter. It's going to make you more active, more productive in general.
Yeah,
So,
building is the hardest part. Getting the ball rolling is the hardest part. But once it's going, everything just works in your favor. And maintaining is way easier. Like once you've built the body, the physique you want, maintaining that, piece of cake. It's nothing.
how long does it take?
I guess it depends where you're starting, but
I mean, how long does it take to maintain it each week?
like I don't know, like you can do like 5 minutes a day,
Right.
if that. Just go
Right.
through all the
And to
muscle
build
groups.
to build it in the first place only can take you less than 40-ish minutes a week.
Yep.
Very simple to do. It's actually the most efficient, effective way of building muscle. Because your body has a limit. Your body can only build so much muscle. So going and lifting weights for an hour a day, 3+ times a week, is you're getting diminishing returns on each extra bit of activity that you're putting out.
You're not even getting diminishing returns. You're actually like kneecapping yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It hits a point of diminishing returns to the point where it actually begins undermining it. You're not actually accomplishing anything with all of that extra work except aging yourself.
Once you've provided the stimulus necessary for your body to start producing muscle, your job then is to like rest, take a break, kick back, let it do its thing. If you keep interrupting that process, like working out more does not make you build muscle faster. Your body's only going to build muscle at a given rate.
Mm-hmm.
That can be maybe adjusted a little bit, pulling a handful of levers, but it's not very fast. You can expect 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month, maybe. So working out if more was better, then why not work out 24/7 until you hit your goal?
Yeah, it clearly doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Anywho, so if you want this guy here in the funny looking hood to actually coach you through this process personally, we have a way for you to do that. Just go to, you can go to thirdpositionnutrition.com. That's 3rdpositionnutrition.com, and you can schedule a call there on the 6-week metabolic mastery program. You'll see the link to schedule a call with yours truly, or you can just shoot an email to Matt, M-A-T-T, at hyperboreanlodge.com. Matt at hyperboreanlodge.com. And you'll get your schedule your first consultation call. We'll talk about your history, any injuries you may have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll get you set up on our program where you get to work one-on-one with Mr. Cooper himself. Okay, so tying that back in, so it was a nice little segue into an ad, but the purpose of that is that these are part of the same domain. Your physical fitness and your physical health is going to become vastly more important as time goes on. We've lived in a time of where we have the capacity for great consumption detached from our actual production. You can consume vast amounts of resources, and you don't actually have to necessarily produce that much. And we just have the capacity to consume vast amounts of resources. But both of these forces are going to be constrained as we enter into this next age. So your ability to economize with your own life and your ability to be disciplined is going to set you even further ahead of the masses. The life that the masses have is not going to be great. The masses are going to live a very difficult life. Now, they're probably going to be medicated through all of it. They're just going to be sort of detached from themselves, but they're going to be living in a living hell. That's where the passive people wind up. The passive people wind up in the coon pods, eating the bugs. The active people are going to be the ones who are actively restraining the forces that are coming at them. This is going to require self-discipline, actual strength, and the ability for someone who meets you to immediately see you as a trustworthy person. You don't want to have Grima Wormtongue physique. You don't want to have what's his name? Boogie. What's his Boogie 2988 or whatever his name is, the YouTuber. You don't want to look like those people. Those are going to be the people that characterize you as part of the Borg. You're going to have the cities, you're going to have the main institutions that are largely populated by coon pods, people that live in these quote-unquote 15-minute cities that are framed as this really idyllic, wonderful thing. But in reality, they're essentially enslaved and trapped there. You're going to have those people, and then you're going to have a lot more of kind of like a Wild West, neo-feudalist world outside of that. The extent to which these are actually geographically separate, I don't know yet. This is we're discovering all of this in real time. It could be possible that you could be part of the, as Kruptos here talks about, like the Christian quarter. You may have a little ghetto within a suburban region that just becomes kind of thriving and self-sustaining. And if you play your cards right, they may just basically leave you alone. You just have to ensure that you're structured there in such a way that everyone has the incentive to either leave you alone or work with you. These things are engineering problems, but you can't even begin to engage in the engineering problem if you don't first have the community to do it with. Technology gives us the ability to leverage our relationships very well, but you have to have those relationships in the first place. And those relationships have to be based on something other than the technology itself. The relationships have to be based around a common set of values and principles that every one of you is invested in, that every one of you is evidently invested in. You have to actively be sacrificing yourself into the community in visible ways to maintain the trust required to actually have a sustainable, thriving, healthy micro-society. And if you can't build a thriving, healthy micro-society, you're never going to build the macro-society. Everyone's trying to figure out, well, how do we restructure the United States? Are you kidding me? My concern isn't the United States. My concern is my family and my immediate social network. What can I do to ensure that my family and my immediate social network stays connected and integrated, and that it's not just the case that everything outside isn't disintegrating us, but we're actually anti-fragile. So that everything outside that attacks us makes us stronger, draws us closer together, makes us tighter. In order to have something like this, it's going to take the cooperative effort of a lot of people who are all willing to invest in something like this for the long haul. And you can create these little micro-societies, and then you can begin daisy-chaining them with other little micro-societies. Eventually, you go from a village to a town, and maybe then to a city. I think the reality of the situation is these sorts of communities are not going to be able to start out in meat space. If you can set something like this up, if you're a person or you have people already and you have the resources and the means to go to one specific place and all congregate there and begin living with the express purpose, like you're not trying to be rich or anything, you're willing to live at a subsistence level to just survive. If you could do that, great. Like, go do that now. But I think the reality of the situation is that a lot of these communities are going to have to start out online. They're going to have to begin as digital communities. But we have to evolve beyond this parasocial relationship thing where you have your online life with your digital community that you go and you're there primarily as a consumer. You just consume their relationship with you. And then you log off and you have your meat space life. We're going to have to move beyond that to where our meat space life and our digital life match up. They're connected. People who are concerned about anonymity, you're going to have to get over it. The only way you can survive anonymously is if you have tremendous resources set aside to ensure that you do that. Xavier says, elaborate on 15-minute cities being a trap because my lib brain still thinks they're great. Random username says, cutting up a city into 15-minute blocks equals dystopian. Small town equals nice. Both can be described as 15-minute cities. Yeah, the 15-minute cities that I'm talking about are the ones that are being set up within cities, where they're basically taking an existing city and saying, we're going to make this a 15-minute city artificially. What that is code for essentially living on a company town with geofencing and mandatory medical procedures and the sorts of things that come with that. I don't think that model is wrong. I think that implementation is hellish. But ultimately, our goal should be to build cities that are ultimately like 15-minute cities. And we're going to have to figure out how to do this between digital space and meat space. And I suspect that we're going to have to make a lot of advances in digital space communities and use those and leverage those to create the meat space communities. The great thing about digital real estate is that it's theoretically infinite. Someone sitting on one piece of digital property doesn't make less digital property for someone else to sit on, theoretically. So that it actually creates a lot of really interesting opportunities for being able to expand and grow a community digitally online that has a relatively small footprint online, but that could translate to a large footprint offline. Again, all of this stuff is going to have to be experimented with and allowed to arise organically out of an initial community of people who are dedicated to the long-term vision of not letting the community fall into this iron law of bureaucracy, where eventually the community gets split between the people who initially formed the community for a particular purpose and then the people who want to use the community for their own purposes. You have to blend those somehow. But it starts with the base layer of trust and an incentive for good reputation within the existing community. Let me get through. We got to wrap this up here shortly. I wound up having more to say than I expected, so I didn't end up having to read as much of this as I thought I was going to. But there was one other thing that I wanted to highlight in here. Okay, like this here. So even though the community is Christian, it is not merely a church or a parachurch organization. This project, actually, I'm going to go a little bit further up. I see these communities as predominantly Christian, but they don't necessarily have to be. But each community would have to be organized around some deep connecting bond. My focus, passion, and commitment is to the Christian community. From its very inception, it has always been intentional. While you can be born into the Christian community, it is never something that just happens as a result of kin relationships and attachment to a place. The Christian faith has always been a thing of conversion and discipleship. There is a commitment to Christ built around repentance and faith. Discipleship is the intentional process of enculturation around the binding reality of Jesus Christ. This bond is incarnate in the local community, but this bond transcends all the other things which might otherwise divide us. Even though the community is Christian, it is not merely a church or a parachurch organization. This project desires to build a functioning, healthy state which assumes the role of the kingship of God within society. It works in partnership with the church, each with its own role, to foster a flourishing Christian society built from the ground up with Christ at its center. Part of this flourishing and reordering is a return to more traditional sex roles. Men lead and drive society forward. Women bind it together. That said, I do not envision some form of return to 1950s housewives whose only role in life is to cook, clean, and make babies. Notice he's not saying that they aren't going to be cooking, cleaning, and making babies, but that's not their only role. I see a return to an economic scale in which household is the basic organizing unit of society. The household is a family enterprise, a farm, a shop, a small business in which the whole family participates. In such a society, the role of the woman is more traditionally female, but is also a much richer and fuller range of activities which contribute to the overall well-being and success of the household. The household might include apprentices and those that help with the household chores who come from other families, but are taken on and become the responsibility of the head of the household, such that it is the head of the household who would find a suitable match for a young member of the house, not their parents. See Peter Laslett, The World We Have Lost, England Before the Industrial Age. This does not necessarily mean a return to pre-industrial technology, but rather to an intentional reshaping of our relationship with technology, especially in regards to scale. We as a society may make things using machines in small shops, but we do not necessarily pursue growth as an end. Stability is the hallmark of a conservative society. Slow changes that are folded into the life of the community in ways that the community can absorb positively into its collective spirit and memory. A little bit more here. This raises the whole issue of technology. In my thinking, one of the central moral tasks of any fledgling parallel polity will be to change our relationship with technology. Presently, the technological system has largely subordinated society to technological ways of thinking and doing. We have given over much of our own personal power as human beings to claim the power that machines and machine thinking have given us. The problem is that once you have bitten into the fruit of the knowledge of technique, there is no going back. I've made the comparison that our relationship with technology bears a lot of similarity to human sinfulness. Like God said to Cain, technology is at the door and its desire is for you, but you must master it. This really is our task, to subordinate technology to the moral, the spiritual, and the human. I would actually go so far as to say it doesn't just bear a lot of similarity. I think there's a much deeper connection here. We may flesh that out a little bit later. I've been kind of thinking and talking about it a lot with guys inside the King-Pilled Discord server, and looking at this relationship between technology and capital and sin and the way that it manifests in the human life, and this positive feedback loop of self-reinforcing processes. We may get into some of that later on, not for today. The last little bit here. I'm not sure there are any easy answers for this task, and if there are a multiplicity of emergent parallel societies, the answers will be slightly different for each. But we simply cannot get rid of technology. Again, it is the tank problem. If your neighbor has tanks and is producing them on assembly lines, you have to figure out how to deal with your neighbor's tanks. You'll have to make tanks or find a way to stop them. Both will involve using technology. But how do you use technology in such a way that you do so because you have to and circumstances force you into it, but all things being equal, you would rather not? How do you do this? I think this is something that should be worked out organically. And I would add that, but it has to be worked out. It can't just be thought about. It has to involve active work and innovation and production and creation and cooperation. We have to start doing this intentionally. There are two main pieces to this. One is to disentangle ourselves from policy, system, and methodology as our primary ways of coming up with solutions. Instead, we would place the emphasis upon persons and culture. As much as possible, we rely on the skills and abilities of persons. We lean on the memory and culture of the community to pass off the traditions of our relationship with tools. We do more with apprenticeships and hands-on learning rather than formal schooling, even when it comes to academics. We rely on the knowledge within the community. The interesting thing is that there is tremendous value in embedded knowledge. This is one of the reasons why there are those who are trying to mechanize or systematize or apply AI technologies to ever more areas of work. These systems and technologies break the power of people and devalues their worth relative to machines and systems. The first area of restraint would be to resist this process, instead doing those things which encourage the value of human skill and knowledge. And I'll just leave it there for now. I think I'm gonna reach out to this guy and see if we can bring him on and talk to him here. because I'd like to pick his brain a little bit more about his understanding of technique he uses it as kind of a technical term, and we'll kind of dig into some of these ideas a little bit more. But I've got a hard out here coming shortly. So to wrap this up, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your participation in the chat. This is a problem that we're taking very seriously, and we've talked a little bit to this point about we're working on re-rolling out the Kingpilled supporting listeners group, and we're still working on some of the technical aspects of it, ironically enough. And this is part of what we're working on, is we want to start actually trying to solve these problems. We're playing around with this idea of, you guys have heard of software as a service. We're talking about community as a service, where community becomes something that you can offer people in return for an investment. You think of that as like an immigration fee. You can buy your way through the immigration process by your subscription to a community. But we want that community to be more than just a passive consumptive model where people are just paying a cover charge to get in and then they just kind of hang out and do whatever, but there's no intentionality about it. This is a holdover, I think, of the boomer generation of kind of arriving at the end of history. And this has sort of been locked in our minds for a long time. Like, it's no wonder that if you look at 1970-ish, which is basically kind of when the boomers really were coming of age, as boomers were becoming adults, innovation kind of stopped in the space of atoms. Peter Thiel has pointed this out, that we've made fantastic advancement in the space of bits, but we haven't made hardly any advancement in terms of atoms. And a lot of other things all happen at that same time, and you can draw a lot of conclusions from that. There's a lot of graphs that sharply depart in different directions when you pass the 70s. I think part of that is this sense of being at the end of history. We're kind of like the generation that has arrived. And by that, I mean the generation, I mean like the generation of this point in modernity. We're kind of like the people who've arrived at the end of history, and we're sort of looking around like, all right, well, what do we do next? And fortunately, our hand is going to be forced. We're going to have to start doing something next, because the landscape is changing quickly, and it's going to keep changing quickly, and it's going to change even more quickly. So we have to be actually positioning ourselves to take advantage of that, because there's no more of this mentality of like, you can kind of like society is like a steady state and you just exist within it and sort of do your thing, where our ancestors were like, if you don't stop working, you're going to fall over and you're going to die. You have to keep working. You have to be working and building constantly. So that this rise of technology has bred in this mentality of consumerism, and everyone is kind of in a default consumeristic state all the time. But in order for us to survive and thrive through this collapse and transition into the era of a new regime, we need to rediscover the capacity of productivity, and not just individual productivity, but community productivity. Building communities online that aren't just communities for the sake of hanging out and trading memes, which hanging out and trading memes is great. There should be communities for that. But it's time for us to begin evolving what an online community actually is and what an online community can actually do. The idea of an online community is still relatively new. And I think people have kind of just accepted that, well, this is what it looks like. You just kind of have a place there online where everybody goes and meets up at different times, and we talk to each other and do whatever else. But pretty soon, the value of your online community is probably going to determine the value of you as a person in the real world. You're going to be personally identified with your online communities. Online communities are going to become so proliferated and so dominant, so overarching. You're going to less and less be identified as like a resident of a state or a citizen of a country, and you're much more going to become identified with what community do you represent, which is kind of a return to a feudal structure. But I'm seeing this incentive structure working its way into a neo-feudalism of sorts. You're better off just riding it. Because I think there's a lot of great things that can come from that. But it's going to require us all proactively making those great things. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, something you want to be a part of, at least in the very infancy, we're just beginning to flesh out what the vision is for the King Pilled group. Right now, it's a Discord server. You can join it if you go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled. But we've got bigger visions for it. We want to start putting our money where our mouth is and actually turning this into something that can become a sustainable polity unto itself in the long run. Something that can actually start solving problems for people where you don't just get a benefit, you don't just pay a cover charge to get in and you just get some sort of like, you get to laugh and have good conversation, whatever, but where the community actually becomes a positive value generator for not just the people in the community, but the people outside the community as well. And how can we do this in a sustainable way to benefit everyone and to incentivize more people to come into the community and contribute to the community to make it even better? That's the sort of thing that we're working on. So if you want to be involved in that, if you want to join us in and trying to come up with this, then subscribestar.com/kingpilled. That'll get you there for now. We're going to be terminating the Subscribestar here before long, and we'll port you over into a new model. Until we've got that, though, if you get in there now, then you will be automatically grandfathered in into whatever the new structure is going to be. You'll be automatically grandfathered in at the top of it. You got any thoughts, Cooper?
You got to get going. So I was thinking about maybe pissing off the Bitcoiners, but maybe we'll do that next time.
Give them a tease.
Decentralization equals disintegration.
Mm-hmm. What was the other thing you said before? Cooper and I were messaging back and forth, and we were kind of brainstorming some of this stuff. And he said the idea is from the title, building a pure trust community. So instead of trying to build, I guess it kind of got away from that throughout the title, or got away from the title throughout the conversation. But building a pure trust community as opposed to building a trustless community. A pure trust community could use trustless technology. But rather than trying to build a pure trust community, what if we got the same mentality that's being put, the same level of engineering and investment and time and everything that's being put into building a trustless community? What if we also began putting all of that time and effort and energy into building pure trust communities? And so then we were jotting down thoughts, and Cooper wrote, decentralization equals disintegration. Centralization equals integration. Proper centralization and thus proper integration depends on a proper principle. Encoded in a principle is a set of values. Right values equals right principle equals right hierarchy equals right integration. And then there was something else, but we'll save that for now. My only response was, yes, I have successfully weaponized Cooper's autism. I've got to do that every once in a while. I got to come up with, he's the one I get all my good ideas from, so I've got to sit there and prod it and poke it and stimulate it and get him sufficiently energized to where his autism kicks in, and then it's like rocket fuel. All right, guys. What's up, Cole Sanchez? Thank you for tuning in for the first time. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel. We've got more stuff coming out. We're going to be talking about these ideas, some others. We have I talked about this framework that we want to elaborate on a way of the way you can begin evaluating your value as a person. I think we're going to start. We've been thinking about starting to talk about it, but I kind of wanted to get some stuff straight in my head before we did, and I think I've done that. So we're going to start getting into that. It's like your capital structure as a person. That'll be a little tease. So do us a favor if you're watching right now, like the stream, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people, and then you can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, follow Cooper on Twitter at Cooper Brooks. And once again, if you'd like to join the King Pill Discord, I should be doing a voice chat later at some point tonight. It's my birthday, so we've got my family has plans for me for dinner and everything, and I've got a work call here in a little bit. But I'm going to try to get in there and do a voice chat later on in Discord this evening. So
For Matt's
If you'd like to-
birthday, you can join the Discord server.
yeah, that's right. Join the Discord server and say happy birthday.
Happy
to me.
birthday, Matt.
Thank you. This has been a rough one. Not like I'm not like super dramatic about it, but like in the past I've always been like, oh yay, my birthday, and today I'm like, oh fuck, it's my birthday. I can feel the clock ticking. So yeah, you can make my birthday better by joining the Discord. Cole Sanchez says another point is I would like to construct together things for my local church/county in a rather sorry man, I'm having a hard time reading this. I would like to construct together things for my local church/county in a rather than religious officiate/manager and builder man as an addition to my day job. I believe that I will.
What?
Yeah, I don't quite understand what that. I think what he's saying is that he wants to be able to work. Yeah, he says, sorry, I'll reword. What I'm getting from it is that he wants to be able to work for, to construct things for the church and stuff, but not be able to have a productive relationship with the church that's not just in a religious capacity, and vice versa with his county. Being able to relate to his county is not just a religious capacity. That was what I think he was saying, but we'll wait and see how he rewords it. Happy birthday, King. Yeah, give me some more banger emotes here for my birthday. That's what you guys can give me as a gift. And frickin' random username here. How many memberships did he gift here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 9. 9 gifted memberships from random username. You are the real MVP, sir. And he also subscribed himself. So a total of 10 gifted memberships today from random username. Appreciate you, my man. And waiting for Cole to put his reworded thing. We'll give it just a little bit longer here. And if we don't get it, then you can just look at the video afterwards and he can comment on the video. How's that for pressure? Type, Cole, type faster. Hurry.
You know what we should do?
What?
Now that we have an intro theme to start the streams off with, at the end, we should do like an outro theme, but it'll just be the intro one played backwards, so it sounds like hell.
Oh, yes. Yes. We should get in touch with the guy who made our intro and see if he can
Yeah,
just
see if he can like
for the
reverse it,
outro.
so it sounds like screeching and horrible and demonic. You ever listen to music backwards?
Backmasking? No. I haven't.
I don't recommend it.
All right, Cole. You've taken too long. Too much dead air, and I've got a work call I got to take here. So appreciate you, man. Thank you for chiming in. I say a different comment, please. I don't know if that was intentionally meant to be funny, but it was. I know addiction is a tough battle and can bring life to a halt in such a terrible situation. Opinions on common temperance battles, like against alcohol or caffeine or pain drugs. Can bring life to a halt in such a terrible situation. Opinions on common temperance battles. Do me a favor, and after the stream is done, go comment on there. I've got a work call I've got to get to here, but I want to answer your question. So do me a favor and just post a comment on the video as soon as the video is posted, and I'll answer there. And then anybody else who has thoughts right now who's watching or is listening after the fact, you can go in and you can go answer his question as well if you want to contribute to that, because that's something that's worth an answer. All right, I got to bounce, folks. I will talk to you